Okay, your attention please. I now declare the June 2026 Agenda Briefing Forum open at 6:30 p.m. and welcome all those in attendance and invite Councillor Lim to read the acknowledgement to country.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The City of Melville acknowledges the Bibbulmun people as the traditional owners of the land on which the city stands today and pays its respect to the Whadjuk people and elders both past and present.
Thank you, Councillor Lim. I draw your attention to the disclaimer on the screen. The affirmation of civic duty and responsibility on the screen. The advice of audio-visual live streaming and recording on the screen. Purpose of the Agenda Briefing Forum on the screen. All right, item 2, attendance and apologies. Councillor Woodall is providing an apology for this evening and Councillor Barber is on approved leave of absence. Now, for the public gallery, to assist me with the smooth running of our meeting, if you plan on asking a question during public question time and you haven't already submitted the question to us in writing, it would be appreciated if you could complete a question time form found on the table to your left and hand it in to the officer prior to the commencement of public question time. Item 3, declarations by members. We now move on to declarations by members. Are there any declarations of who has not read and given due consideration to all matters contained in the business papers presented before the meeting? Nil. Declarations by members who have received and not read the elected members' bulletin? Nil. Item 4, announcements by the presiding member. Approved deputations. 2 deputations have been approved for tonight's meeting from Miss E. Cole of Melville and Mr. D. Seggi of Leeming, both of which are in relation to item UP 26114, proposed draft local planning policy, regulated trees on private land. I will call you forward prior to the discussion of this item to make your deputation to council. Approved written submissions. There are no written submissions that have been received for tonight's meeting. Item 5, disclosure of interest. Can the Head of Governance please advise if there are any disclosures of interest for this evening? Ms Newman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you, no disclosures have been received for tonight's meeting.
Are there any further disclosures from elected members? There are nil. Moving on to public question time. Item 6, public question time. I now declare public question time open at 6:33 p.m. Questions received in writing prior to the meeting. There are questions that have been received with notice this evening. If we have the question asker in attendance or has a representative to ask the question, could you please make your way to the microphone to ask your question when you're called. If there is no one in the audience to ask the question and the question is not taken on notice, the question and response will be provided in the notes of this meeting, which will be available to the public on Friday, 12 June. Mr G. Jenke of Applecross. Thank you. He doesn't appear to be in attendance. Are there any further questions from the public gallery? If there are no questions from the public gallery, I now close question time at 6:34 p.m. Item 7, awards and presentations. This item will be dealt with at the ordinary meeting of council. Item 8, applications for new leave of absence. This item will be dealt with at the ordinary meeting of council. Confirmation of minutes. This item will be dealt with at the ordinary meeting of council. Item 10, new business of an urgent nature. There is no new business of an urgent nature. Item 11, identification of matters for which meeting may be closed. The following items have been identified as containing confidential attachments. That's RFQ 252657, supply of Microsoft licensing, WALGA, and RFT 252626, supply and installation of solar PVs and batteries at the various facilities. Should elected members wish to discuss the confidential attachments, the items will be held until the end of the meeting, and I'll call for a motion to go behind closed doors. Item 12, petitions. This item will be dealt with at the ordinary meeting of council. Item 13, adoption of recommendations en bloc. This item will be dealt with at the ordinary meeting of council. Item 14, reports. I will bring forward item UP 26114, proposed draft local planning policy regulated trees on private land for the convenience of those providing a deputation. UP 26114, proposed draft local planning policy regulated trees on private land. Ms E. Cole, will you please make your way forward to the microphone to make your deputation? You will have 10 minutes to speak, with a further 5 minutes for elected members to ask questions.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and councillors. I'd like to begin by thanking both council staff and councillors for the work that has gone into developing the draft trees on private land policy. I can read that considerable time, effort and expertise has been invested in bringing this policy to this point. It would be a shame if all of that work never made it beyond the nursery. I would particularly like to make a few comments about the alternate motion. Recent legal decisions, specifically regarding the City of Cambridge...
Excuse me, do you mind moving the microphone down a bit so you're a bit louder? Thank you.
Better? Recent legal decisions regarding the City of Cambridge last year show that council should consider the removal of trees as a development decision, irrespective of whether there is a council policy. The decision last week regarding the town of Bassendean clarified that a council can determine the factors to consider. This means that trees on private property policy is a small and natural step to provide guidance to staff and transparency to the community about when tree removal or tree damaging activity is a development. The question is no longer, can a council regulate significant tree removal through planning processes, but how that regulation should be designed and implemented. If this policy proceeds to community consultation, the City of Melville will simply be joining a growing number of local governments that have already implemented significant tree protection policies, including Nedlands, Bassendean, Peppermint Grove, Cambridge, Fremantle, Victoria Park, South Perth, Coburn, Bayswater. Next week will be Mosman Park. Other councils, including Claremont and Perth, are consulting on similar policies, and Vincent, while Gosnells, East Fremantle, Cottesloe, Wanneroo and Serpentine Darradale are progressing towards community consultation. In other words, Melville is not proposing anything unusual. It is considering an approach that is increasingly becoming standard practice across the metropolitan area, and one that has already been tested legally. In fact, if Melville proceeds, we may be in danger of becoming mainstream. There is also a reasonable expectation within the community that this policy will be released for public consultation. Residents asked Council to investigate tree protections in December 2024. And in December 2025, Council agreed to progress this work. Many people have been waiting to see the proposed policy and provide feedback. If the alternate motion succeeds, it will not just be me that will be disappointed. Many members of your communities will be frustrated that they have been denied the opportunity to consider and comment on a policy that they asked the council to develop. I acknowledge the concerns that a new tree protection policy may require additional resources, and that the equivalent of 2 staff positions has been mentioned. However, when spread across the city's ratepayer base, that cost is relatively modest, less than 10 cents per week. That's less than the cost of a minty, although, unlike a minty, the benefits last much longer. In return, the community receives benefits the council itself regularly promotes: increased tree canopy, improved neighbourhood amenity, cooler suburbs, biodiversity protection, better public health outcomes, and increased property values. Not a bad return on investment. Trees are a long-term community asset that cannot be quickly replaced once they are lost. The best time to protect a mature tree was 30 years ago. The second best time is before someone applies to use a bulldozer. Your decision is not about deciding whether the policy is perfect. It is simply about deciding whether the community should be given the opportunity to see it and have its say. I therefore respectfully ask councillors to allow the draft trees and private land policy to proceed to community consultation and to let the community provide feedback before any final decision is made. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Cole. I'd like to remind elected members that a question, it needs to be direct and to the point and is not to be prefaced by comment or other information except where the information is required for the question to be adequately understood. So it needs to be concise and relevant. No argument, expression of opinion or statement except so far as it be necessary to explain the question or answer. Any discussion or subsequent question, that one's not relevant. Okay, so please be concise. And we have 5 minutes to ask questions from Ms Cole. Thank you. Is there anybody who has a question? Councillor Robbins.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and thanks, Ms Cole, for your presentation. My question is just about... Oh, sorry, no preamble. Okay, I'll jump straight to it. Do you think it's appropriate that the city is looking at mandating what people do with trees on their own property when we haven't even gone down the road of mandating verge trees?
Ms Cole?
They're two different questions. What I do know is that the council has made a tree canopy target of 15%. You have to use both levers to actually increase tree canopy. So you have gone down to trial verge trees on industrial properties with the thought that maybe later that you might actually make verge trees compulsory. This policy will not save every tree on private land. There's still a lot of outs in your policy. There's still a lot of ability for people to appeal. There's no need to keep a dangerous tree. It will not stop development. It is simply saying do not moonscape trees when you can actually keep them. And that is something I think is long overdue.
Other questions from elected members? If there are no further questions, thank you very much, Ms Cole.
Madam Mayor, sorry.
Councillor Wheatland?
Is there an opportunity to ask questions of the officers?
Yes, there will be afterwards, after the deputations. Our next deputation is from Mr Segui. Will you please make your way to the microphone to make your deputation? You will have 10 minutes to speak with a further 5 minutes for elected members to ask questions. Thank you.
Sorry, I never know how loud I'm going to be. Good evening, Mayor, councillors and fellow residents. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge and thank the City of Melville for developing and adopting a new tree protection policy. When I stood before council previously, I spoke about stewardship, canopy, cover and the responsibility we owe our future generations. The introduction of these protections is a significant step in the right direction. Mature trees are more than landscaping. They provide shade, cooling, habitat, character and livability that can take decades to create and moments only to lose. For that, I sincerely thank you all and everyone who is involved in developing these policies. I had hoped to bring my 3-year-old daughter again tonight and 18-month-old Hugo, but unfortunately it is their bedtime, as I said last time. Besides, there's probably not enough ice cream in Melville to keep them sitting quietly. Since I first spoke, my son has aged almost 1/8 of his entire life. One of his favourite sounds is bird song. He points excitedly towards the trees and goes beep, beep, beep. Then when he sees black cockatoos, he waves his arms and calls them flap, flap. before attempting to imitate their sound, which sounds much like a dying badger. Neither Lucy nor Hugo understand any of what goes on tonight. They do not understand canopy targets or development approvals or planning policy. Neither Lucy nor Hugo will be able to understand that for quite a while. What they do understand is that a few months ago they stood on the stump of a tree of their favourite playground at their local park. They understood that something loved was gone. And that is why I'm here tonight. I want to add to my previous points that I made at the AGM. My first new point that I'd like to make is that protecting trees should always start with the protection of what we already have. In a suburb where canopy cover is already limited, every mature tree really matters. A mature tree provides benefit today. It already shades homes and footpaths. It already cools our suburbs. It already stores carbon and provides habitat for wildlife. A newly planted tree is important, but it can take decades before it provides the same benefits. That is why we need to make sure that in our development process, we need to ensure that we are protecting what is already there. This applies not only trees in our parks, but the reserves, but also the trees in our backyards and on private property. Some of the most significant trees in Melville are found on private land. They provide habitat corridors, shade streets, neighbouring homes, and contribute enormously to the character of our suburb. Where it is reasonable and practical to do so, we should be looking for ways to retain these trees rather than treating them as obstacles to be removed. The second point is that we should practice the values that we teach. Every day in our schools, we teach our children about conservation. We teach them to care for wildlife, reduce waste, and understand that their actions affect the world around them. What struck me was how naturally children understand stewardship. They understand that if birds need a habitat, we should protect it. They understand that if wildlife needs a tree, we should protect them. Sometimes I think adults are the ones that overcomplicate it. The strongest lesson we can teach future generations is not what we say, it is what we choose to do. Finally, I strongly support planting more trees throughout Melville. We should be planting trees in our parks, our schools, our streets and our neighbourhoods, not because we're compensating for trees that are being lost, but because we're trying to balance the ledger, but because planting trees is simply the right thing to do. Every tree we plant today is a gift for somebody else later. Shade we may never sit in, habitat we may not actually see. The benefits may not be realised for decades. The answer is not choosing between protected trees and planting trees. The answer is we need to do both. Protecting what we have while planting for the future. As a teacher, one of the books I study with my Year 6 students is The Rabbits by Sean Tan. It's a cracking read, by the way. At the end of the book, after the landscape has changed and much has been lost, a simple question is asked by Sean Tan: who will save us from the rabbits? When I ask the students to answer that question, almost all of them come to the same conclusion. We need to plant. Not because I tell them to, not because it's part of the assessment, not because it's on a success criteria, but because to them it seems really obvious. Perhaps children understand something we forget. Stewardship begins with us. With keeping mature trees whether reasonably possible, including in our own backyards, with planting trees for future generations, and with recognising that decisions we make today will shape the world our children will inherit tomorrow. My hope is that future generations inherit a Melville that choose stewardship, a Melville that protected what it could, a Melville that planted for the future, and a Melville that left the landscape better than when we found it. Thank you.
Just remain there for a few moments, if you would. Are there any questions from elected members? Thank you. If there are no questions, thank you for your deputation. Now, prior to discussion of this item, I advise that Councillor McGoldrick has submitted an alternative motion with notice on the matter. A copy has been distributed via the elected members portal and is contained in the agenda for the ordinary meeting of council. An amendment to Councillor McGoldrick's alternative motion has also been received and will be circulated as soon as possible. Now, Mr. G. Ponton, Manager of Strategic Urban Planning, will provide a short officer presentation. Thank you, Mr. Ponton. You have 5 minutes. And he's assisted by Mr. Brellis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As you said, we have a brief presentation tonight in relation, obviously, to the local planning policy for regulating trees on private property. This draft policy responds to the council resolution from December 2025 and the direction contained in that resolution. Specifically, the resolution notes a strong interest in improved management of tree loss on private land and highlighted an overarching objective to retain trees while allowing removal where necessary or practical. The resolution also referred to examination of measures to support long-term tree canopy growth. Since that resolution, there have been a number of workshops throughout 2026 which have resulted in informed the preparation of the draft policy. Next slide, please. So key observations through the preparation of the policy. There was a high-level indication of support for a policy that reflected the WALGA format. There was the theme of this overarching objective to retain trees while allowing removal where practical. Again, this theme of long-term canopy growth, so that if trees are required to be removed, that the policy include measures to ensure long-term canopy growth. Exemptions, there was direction for the policy to have clear exemptions as to when regulation of trees on private property wouldn't be required. There was also a good understanding throughout the process of the resource implications of adopting and implementing a policy. Next slide, please. So all of this work has informed the preparation of the draft policy. The key features of the policy, again, this emphasis on encouraging retention where practical, identification of trees to be regulated, identification of a hierarchy of medium and large trees, significantly noting that regulation would apply only to trees with a height of 8 metres or more, or a canopy of 6 metres or greater. The policy, as presented, also addresses this issue of requiring replacement trees where removal is necessary. Where replacement trees aren't practical on site, the policy also includes an option for a financial contribution. Next slide, please. Importantly, in terms of tree regulation, we're at a point where council will need to adopt a policy position to either regulate trees on private land or to formally exempt tree removal for the need for development approval. Legal precedent has now confirmed that removing mature trees is development, and development that requires development approval unless exempted. So as highlighted on the screen there, council will be required to make a decision to firstly, under option 1, the recommended approach to regulate trees, or option 2, the alternative motion to formally exempt trees by including them in the city's exemption policy. Next slide, please. At the recent EMES, there was a question regarding the amount and rate of change of tree canopy. This slide on the screen shows the breakdown of public and private land tree canopy over the last 10 years. As highlighted there, we have observed an increase in canopy cover on public land over that 10-year period and a decrease in canopy cover on private land. Next slide, please. In terms of the council item and next steps, the recommendation is endorsement of the local planning policy for the purpose of advertising. A further item would then come back to council to consider any community feedback and looking at whether or not a policy would be finally adopted. In terms of implementation of any draft policy. The report makes it clear that there isn't any intention at this stage to implement the direction of the draft until such time as Council has made a final decision. It's noted also that if Council were to go down the path of the alternative motion, that also requires a modification to a policy and would also be subject to a public advertising period. That's the conclusion of the presentation. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr Ponton. Are there any questions for Mr Ponton? Councillor Wheatland.
Thank you. I've probably got 3 questions. I just want to know if there's been any risk assessment undertaken in relation to the alternate motion by my fellow ward councillor, and if council resolves not to advertise a draft local planning policy for regulated trees on private land, considering the strong community interest across the community.
Mr Varelis, Director Planning.
Through the Chair, thank you for your question, Councillor Wheatland. There has been risk assessment undertaken at a broad level, desktop level, conversations between officers and management and myself. We haven't documented that risk assessment, so we'll take that on notice and we'd be happy to provide a documented risk assessment in accordance with the city's risk matrix and risk framework.
Councillor Wheatland.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor, it would be good if we could get that before the meeting next week, considering we don't want to have another special meeting of electors straight after the next one. So thanks.
Did you have a third question, Councillor Wheatland? No? Thank you. Councillor Spanbrook.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have 2 questions, if I may. The first question is, if Council supports this policy in principle, is the administration concerned that public awareness of future restrictions on tree removal may encourage some landowners to remove trees before the policy is implemented, and has this risk been assessed? Thank you.
Mr Varelis.
Through the Chair, that is a practical issue that would come about potentially through the consideration of this policy, notwithstanding the risk assessment question that was put forward by Councillor Wheatland. We can consider that matter as well.
Further question? Councillor Spanbrook.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The second question is, has the department, the planning department, had I'll say discussions with the Natural Areas and Parks Department, or Directorate, or Department I should say, regarding before this policy was actually brought to Council, that what can they do to increase the city's canopy? As in, we have had workshops previously about the amount of trees that can be placed in parks and reserves. So what I'm asking then, has the department had that conversation between the two before this was actually brought to Council? Thanks.
Mr Varelis.
Through the Chair, thank you for your question, Councillor Spanbrook. The City takes a whole of organisation approach in the development of policies, particularly significant policies such as this, and we're well aware of the requirements through the Urban Forest Strategy and the work that's being undertaken by our colleagues in the Natural Areas team as part of the development of this policy.
Councillor Wheatland.
Sorry, and just I just want to ask if this policy gets approved to go out to consultation, can you just explain the process, what would happen and what would happen, how much consultation will happen, what will happen after that, will it come back to Council? Just explain that process moving forward. Thanks.
Mr Ponton.
Thank you for the question. The advertising period for a local planning policy, a minimum of 28 days we would be looking at. If we feel there's a need for a greater period, we'll look into that. But basically be advertising in the usual channels, website, social media, newspaper. The message, I think, is already quite loud and clear on this particular item, but we'll be making sure that all sections of the community have a good opportunity to provide feedback. That feedback is then collated and presented back to Council for a final decision to adopt the policy, modify the policy, or not adopt the policy.
Are there any further questions from elected members? Councillor York.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I did actually email Director Veros earlier today. He answered all my questions. So one of my questions is to follow up on the mapping. You said that the city undertakes yearly mapping. Does that mean if the city noticed a tree was removed in the mapping from one year to the next, that would have been captured by this policy? Does that mean the city would investigate why that tree's now missing or has been removed?
Mr Varellas.
Through the chair, thank you for your follow-up question, Councillor York. The city generally takes a reactive approach to compliance. That is that the city responds to complaints in compliance matters and will assess the proportionality and risk and impact of the compliance issue at hand and determine whether a formal response will be undertaken. As part of the finalisation of this policy and the guidelines that would assist staff in implementing the policy, we would have conversations with council to determine what gauge and impact the city would like to implement in terms of its compliance response should something like that occur.
Mr Varellas, does that mean that we can determine whether we would retrospectively approach a person, a property owner, about the removal of trees?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Councillor York.
Just a quick follow-up on that. Do you think it would be difficult to enforce that sort of retrospective investigation or compliance? Because, I mean, someone could just claim that the tree was badly damaged or dead or had shot hole borer or something like that.
Mr Varellas.
Through the chair, thank you for the follow-up. It would have to be subject to the information and evidence at hand and also have regard for the approach that council would like us to take, which would be formulated through the further development and finalisation of the policy response.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, has the city been able to determine whether the loss of trees on private land is predominantly due to development, or is it due to residents just indiscriminately chopping down trees just for the sake of it?
Mr Varellas.
Through the chair, thank you for your question, Councillor Ross. Another item on the agenda this evening is My Future Melville, the local planning scheme number 6 review and analysis through Arbor Carbon. The consultants that undertake the city's tree assessment flyovers indicates that a significant amount of private property clearing is a result of infill and development on private properties.
So just a question, Mr Varellas, around the protecting trees on private property. When we know that the population is going to increase and the density is going to increase, why are we so heavily dependent on trees on private property when we know that a certain number of those are going to disappear as development occurs?
Through the chair, thank you for your question, Madam Mayor. The city's local planning strategy focuses intensity and redevelopment around the city's activity centres and transport corridors. The vast majority of our locality is made up of suburban areas that does contain significant urban canopy, and the intention of the local planning strategy is to focus redevelopment where trees are likely to be removed in intense areas around our activity centres and transport corridors to negate and alleviate pressure on our suburban leafy green areas.
Are there any further questions from elected members? Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, Mr Ponton, and for your answers, Mr Varellas. I will now bring forward item C26399, Council Plan 2024 to 2034, Part B, Corporate Business Plan. 2026 to 2030, annual review and update. Are there any questions for Mr. Tuffin, the Director of Corporate Services? No. Okay, the next item I'll bring forward is C26397, consideration and adoption of the 2026-2027 budget. Prior to discussion of this item, Ms Ferreira, Chief Financial Officer, and Mr G Tuffin will provide a short verbal presentation on the officer's recommendation. Mr Tuffin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It won't be a presentation. I was asked if I could just actually talk through the recommendation as written. So the budget has been prepared in accordance with the requirements of the Local Government Act and Local Government Financial Management Regulations and the accounting standards. The recommendations before Council seeks endorsement of a number of interrelated items that collectively establish the City's financial framework for the 26-27 financial year. The budget itself has been developed with a strong focus on financial sustainability, maintaining service levels, delivering council priorities and investing in the City's infrastructure assets. It includes operating budget, capital works program, loan funds, reserve accounts and schedule of fees and charges. The proposed differential rates have been structured to ensure that City raises sufficient revenue to fund essential services and infrastructure while maintaining equity between property categories.
Excuse me, Mr Tuffin, the elected members are having difficulty hearing from you. They're thinking that perhaps if you sat in the chair over here that it may assist with hearing. Oh, if you just turn your microphone off, that would be helpful as well. Would elected members like Mr Tuffin to start again? Or you're happy? Yes, you would wish that to be the case? Yes, if you could do that, thank you.
Right. Good evening. Thank you. So the budget's been prepared in accordance with the requirements of the Local Government Act, the Financial Management Regulations and corresponding accounting standards. The recommendations before Council seeks endorsement of a number of interrelated interdependencies that collectively establish the City's financial framework for the 26-27 financial year. The budget itself has been developed with a strong focus on financial sustainability whilst maintaining service levels, delivering council priorities and investing in the City's infrastructure assets. It includes the operating budget, capital works program, loan funds, reserve accounts and the schedule of fees and charges. The proposed differential rates have been structured to ensure that the City raises sufficient revenue to fund essential services and infrastructure while maintaining equity between property categories. The rates have been based on the new gross rental values issued by Landgate and continue the City's long-standing differential rating methodology. I'll just quickly step you through a brief overview of each part of the recommendation. So recommendation 1 and 2 relates to the ratepayer profile and community submissions. We had 158 responses were received, of which 124 were considered valid, the other 34 were incomplete. There's further details in the actual attachment, so I won't say much more about that one. In terms of recommendation 3.1, that is requesting Council to adopt the actual budget, so that's the complete documentation that provides all the financial statements, notes, fees and charges. In relation to recommendation 3.2, that provides an overview and also asking Council to endorse the proposed capital works program, which has an investment value currently of 56.4 million in community infrastructure and assets across the city. The program reflects the cash expenditure required during the financial year and to balance asset renewal, upgrades and new infrastructure investments across the city. A significant focus of the program is to continue with the renewal and maintenance of the city's existing asset base. The city is responsible for managing a portfolio of roads, footpaths, drainage infrastructure, community buildings, sporting facilities, parks, public open space assets, many of which represent a significant community investment accumulated over many decades. Recommendation 3.3 deals with the differential rates and the minimum payments. So what we have in there is the improved residential land rates, the unimproved residential land rates, which is currently proposed at on improved 5%, on the unimproved 8%, and then likewise with the commercial improved and unimproved. Recommendation 3.4 relates to underground power charges, which relates to the areas of Willagee, Myree and Melville underground power scheme. So in the current budget, there was an allocation in relation to the infrastructure implementation. There will be a further fee for the actual connection. That is a fee we collect on behalf of Western Power. In terms of recommendation 3.5, the rate concession, there are two that apply. The first one there relates to a strata storage units. I understand there's been a historical decision of the council to provide a significant discount in the rates because they would otherwise be subject to minimum rating, and from what I understand, they're very small privately owned storage units. And the second one relates to the Melville Glades Golf Course, where there's 100% waiver of the rates or rates concession provided annually. Recommendation 3.6 relates to swimming pool inspections. The council's being asked to adopt a swimming pool fee of $65 per property. This fee contributes to the cost of undertaking the mandatory 4-year inspection program. Any surplus revenue collected is transferred to a restricted reserve and used to offset future inspection costs. Recommendation 3.7, the property surveillance and security charge. Council is asked to adopt a property surveillance and security charge of $72. This charge assists in funding the city's property surveillance and security services provided for the benefit of the community. Recommendation 4 is the ratepayer incentive program. Council is asked to continue the annual incentive program. We have 3 prizes of $1,000 cash, which has been donated by Westpac, and that's in relation to ratepayers who pay their full amount by the first instalment, and there is also a 12-month Leisure Fit membership prize as well. In terms of recommendation 5, that relates to the loan budget. Council itself does not have any loans, so this actually relates to all the community self-supporting loans that Council's provided over the years. So the closing balance for this particular item at the end of the 26-27 financial year will be just under $600,000 at $595,745. Recommendation 8, that relates to the reserves. So Council's being asked to adopt the reserve accounts and the transfers in and out as shown in the schedules. The proposed closing balance of the reserve funds is estimated to be $106,500,000 by the 30th of June 2027. Recommendation 8 relates to the fees and charges. So there's a full schedule of fees and charges that's provided in the budget itself, listing those. Recommendation 8 relates to the payment due date. So it's a requirement under the Act that Council provides and sets appropriate timeframes so that people have, believe it's 35 days from the issue of the first notice. And so those dates are set by legislation in terms of the requirement. In terms of recommendation 9, the transfer of surpluses to the rates equalisation reserve. So at some point, Council had established a reserve for the purpose of if by the end of the financial year there is a operating surplus, that those funds, or net surplus, those funds are transferred into this reserve and then used for later budgets to offset any additional costs or deficits that may arise. Recommendation 10 relates to the administration and interest charges. So Council's asked to adopt the administration and interest charges applicable to rates and service charges. The recommendation maintains no administration fee for ratepayers paying by instalments, However, there is an instalment interest rate of 2%, an overdue interest rate of 3.5%, and we will continue up until I think it's about October, the credit charge surcharge of 0.6%. Also, I'll just note in relation to the instalment interest rates, under the Act, that is capped at 5.5%. Council has elected in the past to select 2%, so well under the maximum. And likewise, interest charged on overdue rates can be as high as 11%, and council has elected 3.5%. In regards to recommendation 11, interest charges on other outstanding debts, council, it's been recommended that the full 11% be charged on those outstanding debts. However, for community clubs and organisations, a reduced rate of 50% be applied, unless the debt is $50 or less. Recommendation 12 just relates to the eligibility of the rates incentive prize, which essentially says that elected members and staff are not prohibited and would not be able to receive the prizes to ensure integrity and fairness of the incentive program. Recommendation 13 is also a legislative requirement. Council's required to establish a variance level. The historical standard, which has been recommended once again, is 10% or 100,000, whichever is greater. This threshold is what we use to provide the monthly variance reporting on the monthly financial statements. So in summary, the recommendation before council adopts the city's 2026-27 budget, the rates, fees and charges, capital works program, reserve movements and associated financial arrangements required to support service delivery and infrastructure investment over the coming financial year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Tuffin. Are there any questions? Councillor Wheatland.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that amazing explanation. Where are the storage units, 3.5A, please? And what are they used for, apart from storage? Who are they? Who are they for?
Sorry, in terms of the physical location, I might have to take that on notice, but from what I understand, they're privately owned and they're as small as sort of 2 metres by 2 metres. So my understanding was the decision was made quite some time ago that council didn't think it would be appropriate to charge the minimum rate because under the rating system, because if we apply the rate and the dollar to their GRV as separate things, they wouldn't actually be reasonable to apply that minimum rate.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you. In relation to the recent decision to cancel funding support from an external organisation for cockatoo-focused revegetation in the city of Melville, was that funding included in the budget? And is the expense included in the budget? And if that funding has now been cancelled, what's the how much is that expense?
Mr Tuffin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Councillor Ross, for the question. I'm just looking, I believe a response was provided this afternoon just in relation to that, because I wasn't clear in relation to which funding you're referring to.
Madam Mayor, if I may.
Councillor Wheatland.
I think that's in relation to the email I sent about the Perth NRM and the in-kind support and the, is that what you're talking about, Councillor Ross?
Councillor
In-kind
Ross,
support
yes.
and the funding that they pulled from the city in whatever location, but in the email I saw and forwarded to everyone, it said because it didn't line up with the Carnaby Cockatoo action plan of the city and it doesn't line up with what they do. I forwarded it to everyone, so.
Mr Coton, I believe, is going to be able to answer that question, Director Environment and Infrastructure.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, the funding that I believe is being referred to is for some proposed revegetation work that was proposed to occur at Piney Lakes. That was in the 27-28 financial year, so not in 26-27, so it wouldn't have any impact. There wasn't a specific amount. There was an amount of approximately, I understand it, that Perth NRM had of $36,000, which was to be split between two councils, so not necessarily on a half and half basis, but it wouldn't have been, if we had obtained the funding, it wouldn't have been till 27-28 anyway, so it doesn't impact on 26-27 budget.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions to the officers? Councillor Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And if I can just thank Mr Tuffin for that explanation of every point of the officer's recommendation. I don't think we've ever had that before and I found it really helpful. So thank you very much. Just a question about an item in the Capital Works program. It's under roads and it's Marmion Street. It says road rehabilitation of Marmion Street, Justinian Street to Barl Street. And the total cost is, the cost for 26-27 is 2.2 million. I was hoping you could outline why that is so expensive. Thank you.
I think I'll refer that to Mr Coton.
Yeah, I'll take that on notice and circulate a detailed scope of works.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Wheatland.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Robbins, for raising that because it just reminded me of something else I was asked about. In relation to roads in Money Road, I'm just trying to find it. Money Road rehabilitation. Could I also ask you to, on notice, provide me with an update on what that is with 380,000, please?
Mr Tuffin? Sorry, Mr Coton, once again?
Yes, we'll circulate that information as well.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Robbins.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. It's probably similar to the question I've just asked, but there's also a line item for road rehabilitation program, and the description just says road rehabilitation and resurfacing program, and the cost of that's 5.1 million. So I guess it sounds like that is just, I guess, like a overall figure for all the rehabilitation across the city. But then my question is just why is there a couple of streets, like the Marmion Street seems to have its own line, but then there's like a parent group for all the others. So if we can just have outline why they're not all listed under there and some are pulled out individually. Thank you. I'm assuming it will need to be taken on notice and that's fine. Thank you.
Mr Coton.
That would generally be because of the different funding sources. So the 5.1 million is the local roads rehabilitation, and as Councillor Robbins has outlined correctly, the list of those projects was provided to council as part of the business planning, the detailed breakdown of that. Some of the other ones are listed separately where they're funded through Black Spot project grant funding on Metropolitan Regional Road Group, and I believe Money Road is listed separately because that's actually a carry forward project. It's been on the budget for this year that isn't being completed, so it's been listed separately next year for that purpose.
Councillor Wheatland.
Thank you. Sorry, apologies. In relation to the estimated future cash outflow, part of the Capital Works program, I note that there's a couple of items there that there's quite a large amount of money. I mean, overall in Parks and Foreshores, it's $7.3 million future cash flow. Is that based on today's Capital Works? Yeah, okay, thanks.
Are there any further questions from elected members? If there are no further questions, thank you very much, Mr Tuffin and Mr Coton. We now move on to items for this evening, and that's M2689, Annual Review of Statutory Delegations and Authorities 2026. Mr Yildiz is available to answer questions. He's Director of Legal, Governance and Risk. Are there any questions? Councillor Hong.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a couple of questions about the proposed changes to the delegations and authorisation manual. I noticed 3 items have been removed, which are reimbursement of expenses for employee committee members, disputes between local governments, and due dates for rates and service charges. Could you please provide some background on why these delegations are being revoked and how these matters will be dealt with going forward? Thank you.
Mr Gilberts.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for your question, Councillor Hong. The reason, a part of our review is also to determine what are the appropriate decision-making body for decisions. For each of those 3 in particular, it was appropriate that the decisions are made by Council. In relation to the reimbursement of expenses for employee committee members, we don't have any employee committee members, so there won't be any need for any reimbursement for them. In relation to disputes between local governments, it was determined it's more appropriate that Council would make that decision and the actions from there, and as part of that recommendation there might be an authorisation for the CEO to take further actions, but instead of having that delegated, that should be the council level decision making. And for the due date of rates and service charges, that's always seems to be embedded within the council resolution, as you've seen tonight, for adoption of the budget, and therefore there's no requirement for delegation to the CEO.
Thank you. Are there any further questions on this matter? Okay, let's move on to the next one. M2687, Common Seal, May 2026. Any questions for Mr Gilberts? Councillor Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a question about the first one, City of Melville and the Air Force Association and the withdrawal of the caveat and replacement of caveat to facilitate registration of the change of registered proprietor for 2 and 12 Bull Creek Drive, Bull Creek. Could we please have a little bit more information about what's involved with that?
Mr Gilberts.
And thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. That transaction involved a restructure of the organisation, but more importantly, as part of that, they needed to re-engage with their funding provider. So as part of doing that, they needed to remortgage the property, so therefore they needed the caveat lifted and then replaced at the back end. So the city's the city's interests are all protected because the caveat is back in place.
Any further questions? If there are no further questions, we'll move on to the next item, which is M2688, City of Melville Policy Framework and Policy and Legislation Working Group. Are there any questions for Mr Gilberts? If there are no questions, we'll move on to item C26396, Land Optimisation Strategy. Mr Tuffin is available to answer questions. Are there any questions? Councillor Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll just double check before I start. Nothing in this item is confidential, is it?
No, there's no confidentiality in these items.
Great, thank you. Just a question about the cap on investment. So essentially the strategy talks about a $10 million soft cap and then potentially going to $15 million for purchases as an absolute maximum. Just wondering if Mr Tuffin could please explain the rationale for that $10 million soft cap and the $15 million hard cap. Thank you.
Mr Tuffin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Councillor Robbins. It was really just to, I guess, provide some guidance in terms of a maximum, in terms of any proposed acquisition would be subject to a business case and presented to Council for final decision. I think that was really just to put a target value in there for Council's comfort.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Robbins.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just a question about how the strategy relates to transfers into and out of the Land and Property Reserve every year. What's the process for Council determining how much money will go into and out of that reserve? Is that within the strategy? Is that determined elsewhere? Thank you.
Mr Tuffin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Councillor Robbins. It's currently determined through the long-term financial plan. So the first one that was established set up a 10-year horizon on the reserves, and I believe that the transfers in were based on historical decisions. As has been mentioned, that's something that we do intend to do a full review of the reserves, but also the long-term financial plan to make sure that those allocations are still appropriate for council's needs.
Are there any further questions for Mr Tuffin? No further questions. We'll move on to the next item. C26390, Policy Review, CP 005, Strategic Land Management. Are there any questions for Mr Tuffin? Councillor Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The policy talks about essentially making decisions based on commercial benefits and making decisions based on community outcomes. So my question is, does the policy contain any guidance around how council makes decisions based on, I guess, like how much weight to put on the commercial benefits of a particular course of action versus the community benefits of a particular course of action? And yeah, does the policy provide any guidance on that? And if not, why not?
Mr Tuffin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Councillor Robbins. Yes, the land optimisation strategy actually introduces in Appendix 1 and 2 the set criteria for commercial property investments, and then also community-based property investments, recognising the difference between the two, because what a common process might be to do a net present value calculation on a commercial property to see what the return might be, as we're to do an exercise like that on a community proposal would almost be a waste of time, because you'd just about guarantee it would be a negative return, because the criteria that the investment decision's made on is very different from a commercial property as opposed to community. So the policy introduces reference to the land strategy and those set criteria in the back of the strategy.
Councillor Robbins.
Thanks, Mr Tuffin. Yeah, and I appreciate those criteria. I guess what I'm asking about is some guidance for council on balancing the two. And, you know, we can choose some recent relevant examples like Morrow Mews, the Esplanade, where there's been strong community view on what we should do with the land. And then obviously if we're only looking at it economically, the view is almost the opposite. So what I'm looking for is some guidance on how does council take into account and how much weight do we place on each of those? Or is the answer just, you know, that's not for officers to provide guidance on that, and that's just for council to make its own determination?
Mr Tuffin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Councillor Robbins. Correct. So the criteria is for the formulation of a business case, and the end decision lies with council in terms of the criteria will hopefully provide council with the information to be able to make an informed decision. But I think every acquisition would be on merit, whether it is a commercial acquisition or community. It's just the criteria we're introducing will provide council with a lot more information to be more informed about making those decisions, and hopefully consistently applying that criteria so we do have consistent decision making.
Great. Thanks, Mr Tuffin. Appreciate it.
I have a question about strategic land management and the purposes. In just following on from Councillor Robbins, my understanding was that when we made commercial decisions, it was to supplement rates or help reduce our reliance on residential rates, as opposed to community benefit, which is another thing. Is that my understanding? Have I got that correct?
Correct, Madam Mayor. So it looks at both. We currently, as part of the strategy, will look at our existing asset base. We currently have our land and properties of around about $450 million worth, plus an additional $64 million in property investment portfolio. So part of the strategy and the policy is to look at how we can optimise the use, both from a commercial point of view in terms of improving our returns, but also to identify new incomes to help diversify our revenue streams, but also at the same time to look at current community facilities and make sure that we're optimising their use, whether there's an opportunity to rationalise any of our current holdings. So it's quite a broad look at how we can make the most of our current land holdings.
Thank you, Mr Tuffin. Councillor Wheatland.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to try and understand if any community consultation or engagement has been undertaken on these changes to this CP 05 strategic land management.
Mr Tuffin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Wheatland, no.
Follow up?
Councillor Wheatland.
And look, I understand it's probably not required, it's not part of the process, but I just wondered why, when there's changes from 12 weeks to the minimum legislative requirements under the Act, we haven't gone out to consult with the community before bringing this policy back to council for a decision.
Mr Tuffin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Councillor Wheatland. The reason being is there is a legislative framework in place, so any major land transaction requires a 6-week community consultation period, and likewise any disposal under 3.58 requires a minimum of 14 days public notice, and with the 12 weeks it's a bit excessive, and for the council to operate on a more commercial basis, particularly for those commercial acquisitions, it just makes it very difficult when it's a 3-month consultation period.
Councillor Green.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just wondering if we're talking about perhaps the proportion of our land assets that we're using for community purposes and what we're using for economic or commercial purposes. Is there any guidance of what would be a sweet spot, say, for local government, or a sort of a recommended range, just at a high level for what percentage of our land should be used for commercial purposes and what should be community?
Mr Tuffin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Councillor Green. No, I don't believe so. So as it currently stands, we have a significant community property and land portfolio, and we also have a separate portfolio which has a sole purpose of property investment, development, accumulation, and we also have a specific reserve currently that has $18.5 million in it that's been established to take advantage of any possible future acquisitions that could be added to our commercial portfolio.
So just in relation to Councillor Green's question, is it possible to quantify, say, 25% commercial and, the other percent being for community purpose? Would that be a way to... perhaps I'll have that conversation with you later, because it seems that if we put a percentage on it, we're not looking at what the commercial realisation is, financial realisation is, in terms of reducing dependence on residential rates. We may be limiting ourselves because the commercial investment may not bring the returns we're looking for that relief to residential rates. would I be heading along the right lines on that one? And you can't really quantify it with a percentage. It would be in terms of what our income is and our outgoings and how we can use that money to reduce our residential rate dependency.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Correct. I guess the issue with it as well is it requires a fairly substantial investment to change the makeup of our income. I provided a recent example of a potential acquisition. I think it was in the order of about $4.5 million. It was producing a yield of around just over 7%, which was, I think, around about $270,000 per annum. So to achieve $1 million would need to purchase 3 other properties of that value, so you're sort of in the order of $12–16 million. And as it currently stands, our investment portfolio probably represents around about 10% of our total property portfolio, thereabouts.
Okay, so then I guess the question is that the council could consider a percentage that they think is going to bring a better return for the purposes we need it for. The 25% was mentioned.
Certainly, if that was a target to aspire to, but as I mentioned, it would take some time or either a very serious financial commitment to reach a 25% target.
Okay, are there any further questions from elected members? Okay, if there's no further questions, we'll move on to the next one, and that is item C26-391, RFQ 252657, supply of Microsoft licensing. Now, I'd like to remind the council that there is a confidential attachment associated with this item. If elected members wish to discuss the contents of the attachment, I'll hold this item to the end of the meeting so we can go behind closed doors. Is there any interest in discussing the confidential attachments? There is from Councillor Robbins. Okay, we will hold this item till the end of the meeting. We're moving on to item C26-392, Statements of Financial Activity, April 2026. Are there any questions for Mr Tuffin? If there are no questions, I'll move on to item C26-393, Investment Statements, April 2026. Okay, if there are no questions for Mr Tuffin, I shall move on to the next item, C26-394, Schedule of Accounts paid April 2026. Are there any questions for Mr Tuffin? Moving on to the next item, C26-395, RFT 252626, Supply and Installation of Solar PVs and Batteries at Various Facilities. I'd like to remind the council that there is a confidential attachment associated with this item. If elected members wish to discuss the contents of the attachment, I will hold this item to the end of the meeting and we can go behind closed doors. Are there any questions about the attachments? Councillor Spanbrook.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think my question would have to be answered when we go behind closed doors.
Behind closed
Thank
doors?
you.
Okay, thank you. Next item, UP 26113, My Future Melville, Local Planning Scheme number 6 review, further preliminary community consultation. Mr Ponton will now provide a short officer presentation. Mr Ashford will make a short presentation. Thank you, Mr Ashwood. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening, councillors. I'm accompanied by Ms Ellis, who will also help to assist in discussing the engagement approach. Specifically, we're here this evening just to, I suppose, continue on the journey of reviewing our local planning scheme. As you're aware from our recent workshops, we've reached another point in the journey where we're wanting to engage further with our community on some revisions to the draft density approach that we're looking to take. We've been on a journey of discovery based, starting back in 2024 when we first engaged with our community on some draft proposed density changes. We heard quite clearly from some parts of our community about what their thoughts were on some of those changes, and we've been able to incorporate a lot of those recommendations, both for inclusions and for removals. We've also had quite clear directives from yourselves and from residents via AGM motions. We've also been engaging further with our state agencies, such as the Department of Education and Department of Water and other agencies. And then finally, we've been engaging with some third-party consultants to develop some very technical inputs in terms of traffic modelling, tree loss and land economics, all of which has culminated in a scope of revisions, which, if we can go to the next slide, you'll be able to see on your screens. It's a little bit faded, but hopefully you can see what we can see on our screen, which is the areas in blue remain. The areas in dark grey have been entirely removed from scope, and you'll notice that is primarily the breadth of changes along Canning Highway and some of the changes around Booragoon. The areas in the dark orange have had the proposed density increase reduced to a comparatively lower density increase, and then the areas in yellow represent new additions, and they vary primarily in the southern parts of Melville, but a few modest R20 inclusions in parts of Victon and Mount Pleasant. If you go to the next slide, you'll be able to see this is a composite map now that shows the proposed 2026 changes. Importantly, you'll notice that the green represents the vast majority of the proposed density increases, and they are R40 zoning. So we've also simplified the breadth of density changes. Now we're proposing primarily a very modest R40 density increase, with the darker blue areas a combination of the R20 areas in, as I mentioned, Victon and Mount Pleasant, and a very modest proportion of R2060 along Leach Highway. The station precincts remain in scope, but they are considered to be a separate exercise that we're engaging with the state government on. So they form part of our 2050 modelling, but aren't a specific project within the LPS review. I'll pass on to Ms Ellis now to speak on the engagement approach, if that's okay. If you can go to the next slide, please.
So the intention for the engagement approach will start, depending on the decision of council, on the 20th of July. We intend to go out with a letter. Well, it was going to be a letter, but we're going to bundle with the rates notice will be an A3 map with all of the outlined areas. We felt that was the best and most cost-effective approach to hit everybody. That will be supported by a strong digital communications campaign. We'll have a dedicated webpage on Melville Talks, and also targeting people who've shown interest in the past, a strong social media, e-news and an email campaign. We'll also be doing a full wrap of the Perth Now, which will be in the last week of July. So we will cover, if anyone hasn't received it via mail, they'll get it at that wrap with Perth Now, and also partnering with Perth Now Melville. There'll also be signage and digital screens across all of our facilities. So based on that, we'll be also collecting EOIs for the period of either four weeks, and doing 2 focus groups, one with invited residents and one with people who've shown interest. We'll also be supporting all of our other engagement activities through a roadshow and pop-up information sessions, which will be scheduled from the 20th into the focus group period.
Next slide, please. So the resolution is just on the screen, and this resolution is intended to ensure that we can maintain the timeframe established in the staging and implementation plan that was endorsed by Council in December, and would see us, as Ros mentioned, engaging starting in July for a period of approximately 2 months, and then presenting back to the elected members via an EMS session by October. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr Ashwood and Ms Ellis, are there any questions? Councillor Wheatland.
Thank you, and I've just gone back to look at a presentation. Can we go back to the slides where you had the changes, the ones that were included, please, with the green on it? I think it was green, or the yellow. Oh. Just wondered...
You're looking for the maps?
Yeah, so the one before this, please. Oh no, that's... Yeah, so that R40, the yellow one, is that near the aged care place on the corner of North Lake Road and Leach Highway?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, yes. That's a parcel of Willoughby that is, for some reason, excluded from the provisional R40 changes that exist elsewhere, so it's sort of a missed portion that we look to reconcile.
And just a follow-up too, please.
Yes, Councillor Wheatland.
The proposed change area in Palmyra and Melville, can you go to the next slide, please? Sorry. Yeah, that one. So is the R20, R60 just to bring it in line with the other zoning along Leach Highway already?
Ashwood?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, predominantly that it would see a mirroring of what we see on the south side of Leach Highway.
Apologies if I've asked these questions before. Just one more, and the R40 in the lime green, that's all new density. What is it currently now, please?
Ashwood?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it's predominantly R20.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any further questions from elected members? Councillor Green.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. It's referring to Canning Highway and the areas where previous proposed density changes have been removed. Can you just confirm, is there, so basically there's areas there that will now remain unchanged. Can you confirm that along Canning Highway there, within those areas, there is some zoning that is still R20?
Mr Ashwood?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Within the specific areas that you see on that plan, they are primarily R20 densities or lower. They fill in gaps between other areas that are already high density along Canning Highway.
Sorry, just a follow-up. So just straight R20, not R2060 or anything like that, just straight R20?
Mr Ashwood?
There are a few instances where the zoning was looking to create a greater distance between the lower and the high density. So some of them were R3040, and there are a few areas that are R2060, but the majority of them were a single base coding that was closer to R20.
R20, thank you.
Are there any further questions from elected members? If there are no further questions, thank you very much for your presentation, and we'll move on to the next item. Motions with notice, item 15. Notice of motion, problematic waste. The motion is proposed by Councillor Lim. Additionally, I advise that there is an officer advice note attached, which was distributed as part of the ordinary meeting of council agenda. So Mr Coton, or Director Coton, Mr Coton, Director Environment and Infrastructure, is available to take questions on this item. Are there any questions? There are no questions. We shall move on to item 17. We need a motion. Oh, you've got a question. All right. Back to item 15. Councillor Wheatland. Okay, so we're on to item 16, motions without previous notice. There are no motions without previous notice for this evening. Now we move on to confidential items for this evening. Okay, we need a motion. Item 17, matters for which the meeting was closed. We are going to close the meeting, so I need a mover and seconder, please. Councillor Hong moved. Councillor Green seconded. Is anyone against? If nobody is against, I declare that carried. We are now going behind closed doors. We are going to turn... Streaming to come back on before we wrap up the meeting. Okay, for the purposes of the notes, the following items were discussed behind closed doors. C26391 RFQ 252657 supply of Microsoft licensing, WALGA, and a C26395 RFT 252626 supply and installation of solar PVs and batteries at various facilities. So item 19 is closure. For the purposes of the notes, can the... there being no further business, I declare the meeting closed at... Pardon? Oh, there's a question. Oh, Councillor Wheatland.
Thank you. I just wondered, you said you called me today about a late item coming to council next week. Is that right? Was it the Canning Bridge? Is Canning Bridge coming next week, or did I get that wrong?
Mr Varellis.
Through the chair, there is a item pending the decision of the Statutory Planning Committee of the West Australian Planning Commission. They're meeting tomorrow. Subject to the outcome of that decision, a report will come to council as a direct item to the ordinary meeting.
Okay, are there any further questions? If not, there being no further business, I declare the meeting closed at 8:01 p.m. Thank you very much for your participation and attendance.